fighting against all this propaganda led by different terrorist groups is very, very important. So using our social media, sharing content, sharing evidence from what happened in those villages is so crucial to the time we are at, because as we are talking, the Israeli army is still in the process of basically fighting different centers of Hamas, different terrorist operational centers in Gaza. So as we go deeper into this operation led by the Israeli army, people will see more videos of different areas of Gaza being bombed, and they will be manipulated by the propaganda that Hamas is leading, showing only the bombing of Gaza and the bombing of different places in Gaza as if Israel initiated and started this whole thing.
Right.
And people will forget that what happened on 7 October 7th, sorry, was just inhuman, brutal, and so tragic. We are all broken. Everyone. We had like a circle of Israelis here in LA meeting up just to bring comfort to each other, hug each other, because we couldn't sleep for nights.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I've noticed within the media is, people call this Israel's version of 9/11, and I think it's worse, because if you adjust for population, it would be like the equivalent of, because we lost 3,000 Americans in the 9/11 attacks. But in this case, if we were to adjust it to compare to the US population, you're dealing with like 36,000 plus.
Yeah.
It's pretty catastrophic what happened.
Yeah. And then that doesn't take into consideration, it's in some ways it's almost better to die than to be kidnapped by Hamas.
Right.
And so there is no what will happen on that front, and we're praying that God intervenes there in a miraculous way. So I'm not trying to speak anything, but
right.
If we talk about like what typically happens in kidnapping with Hamas, it would be better to have died than to have been kidnapped at this point,
Yeah. And that's what makes it so hard. Yeah.
Maybe I'll share just an anecdote from one of my classmates. I talked with him about the situation. I was like, you probably heard about what is going on in Israel. And he was like, yes, and it's so troubling and so bad. And I don't know, he told me, I don't know, what is your take on Palestinian people, if you think they should have a state and Israel should have a state. I'm like, maybe 80% of the Israeli population believe that in two-state solution, because demographically, it's very problematic to have everyone in one state. But you can't mix terror groups that fighting against Israel out of anti-Semitic worldview with the Palestinian people. Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And he was shocked. He didn't know that. And he claimed that, he said he's a Christian, he's a believer. And he didn't know that Hamas is not an activistic group that fighting for human rights. And I think maybe to contextualize it, maybe we can read something from their charter.
Yeah, so this is the Hamas charter, everybody.
Yeah, like official statement, for why they exist.
There are many points in their charter stating that they are fighting for killing Jews. It's not about only Zionism or the state of Israel as a modern thing. It's killing Jews, basically. So, which is equal anti-Semitism. It's just purely anti-Semitism. So let's read it. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them, just like that. Yeah. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, "Oh, Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." That's part of the Hamas charter. This is not a human rights agenda. Whenever they enter these villages and slaughtered families in their living rooms, burning babies, and killing old people hiding in their shelters. How people can mix that with human rights? It's just
Right.
unclear.
Yeah.
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 And I think the thing we were talking about backstage is saying, yes, Hamas wants to kill Jews, but they also want to see the downfall of Western civilization. And so the people cheering on Hamas right now in the States, if they were to succeed, I don't think they will. But if they were to succeed, you would be next. And I think that that's a really important thing to note, is it's not, and it's just pure hatred is what it is. You know, they're not freedom fighters, you know, and there's a lot of stuff that's being hidden in a large majority of the media, I would say, here in the States. There's a lot of information that's being hidden about what Hamas does. They take the rockets, they put them in schools, they put them in people's homes, all kinds of stuff. And I think the other thing to note is that a lot of the problems that Gaza is experiencing right now, like no water, no electricity, are things that Hamas did to them, did to their own people. And then now they're, I'm seeing, actually, I saw an article this morning of MSNBC saying, oh, Gaza doesn't have any water and they're being bombed by Israel. I'm like, Hamas did that to them, and I think that's the other important detail to note, is they don't want people to know that.
And I think it's something else that's important too. I mean, Hamas exists for jihad, which doesn't just exist in Gaza. I mean, that's something that's happening in Syria. Something that would be interesting to touch on today is more than likely how Israel's northern border will open up to start fighting Hezbollah. And so Hezbollah is outside of Syria and Lebanon. Essentially, they're definitely backed by Iran. I spoke with a good Israeli friend of mine yesterday, who was saying that Israel's hoping actually that they open up this front with Hezbollah, even though it seems like it would be difficult to fight in two places. This is what their hope is, because Israel has been living. It's like living with a neighbor who has a knife on your throat at all times, And so they have, they're hoping that there's enough international sympathy right now that they can go in and they can root out Hamas and Hezbollah, because they both stand for global jihad, and that's exactly, like, it starts with the Jews, but you guys are exactly right. They want it to go west as well,
Yeah. So Chris, before we get into other things, because Yaron, I actually really want to talk about, like, in the tail end of the show, I want to talk about your music, and because you're sharing some stuff backstage, in regards to your heart for Arabs and all that, which I think is really important, and it's actually a powerful testament to, I think, a lot of Israelis' heart towards just unity and stuff like that. But